PlayStation VR2 is the most anticipated gaming VR headset of 2023, and with only about a month before its official release, I got to try it hands-on during the CES just a week ago. Only a handful of people managed to snatch those demo spots as they were in such high demand at the convention, and I was extremely excited to be among the lucky few that got to try it before I will receive it in February. I got to play with it for about 30 minutes, demoing the game Horizon: Call of the Mountain, and while this is not sufficient to make a full in-depth review of this headset, it is more than enough for me to give you my first impressions. So I will share with you my most memorable moments, my thoughts, some concerns, and also thoughts about its controversial price. Please keep in mind that I will be doing a full in-depth review after I receive this headset in February, so some of my thoughts are likely to change after I've had enough time to test this headset. Make sure to subscribe to DiscoVR so that you don't miss that review, and more PSVR content will be coming to DiscoVR as well. And now we're ready to dive in. Just like PSVR1, PSVR2 features a halo-like design of the head strap, which I'm happy about because this headset featured one of the most comfortable designs despite the headset's size. I did find myself adjusting it throughout the game as I found it to be just a little bit front-heavy, and I wasn't sure how tightly I needed to fix it using the gear on the back, but eventually I did find the right position and proceeded to play the game comfortably. PSVR2 has the rubber accordion-looking facial interface, which made sure that there were zero light leaks when you were wearing it. And it also provides some in-game haptic feedback. When I put on the PSVR2, the first thing I saw was the game menu, and at first I got a little bit scared and concerned because the image looked unexpectedly blurry and fuzzy. But luckily there was nothing to worry about, because to fix it I just needed to go through the initial calibration process, which involved adjusting the correct distance between your pupils and of course setting up your eye tracking. That part reminded me of the eye tracking calibration on Quest Pro, as all you needed to do was follow the orb moving on the display using just your eyes for about 10 seconds. After that, I was able to test the eye tracking by looking at these dots, and the corresponding dots would highlight pretty instantly. PSVR2 features something called dynamic foveated rendering, which is allowed by the eye tracking on the device. And if you've never heard of it, dynamic foveated rendering is a feature that allows only the parts of the display that you're directly looking at to be rendered at the maximum quality, and the area around it would render with a reduced number of pixels, which makes the game way less taxing on the headset's GPU. That basically allows the headset to unlock a lot more rendering power than it could if it was rendering the entire display at maximum quality. And this explains why the image I saw when I first put on the headset was so blurry. That's because my eye tracking wasn't working correctly, and I could notice the areas that were rendered with reduced quality. But after the eye tracking was set up, even if I moved my eyes very quickly, I could not notice the difference in rendering. Everything looked very bright and sharp and simply beautiful. The next thing literally made me laugh with excitement. Unlike in Quest Pro, where the eye tracking currently is only noticeable in social apps, in PSVR2 the eye tracking is already integrated in the Horizon's gameplay UI, meaning I could select the in-game menus just by looking at them and clicking on the X button on my controller. Literally, your gaze is the pointer, and it worked flawlessly. It really made me feel like I'm using the headset from the future, and it simply felt like magic. I hope that many more games that will be coming out in PSVR2 will be incorporating this gaze-based UI gameplay. I also managed to see the pass-through on PSVR2. It was still black and white, but nothing like what you see on Quest 2. The image was sharp, and you could perceive the depth to walk around freely if you need to. True, it would be better if the pass-through was full color, but remember that in PSVR2, pass-through is merely used to set up your garden and not to play mixed reality experiences. I must say, I really respect Sony's ability to focus all their development on the main features of the headset that would directly impact the gaming experience of users without dispersing their attention to some extra features that many users wouldn't even use in the first place. I feel like there are so many companies that are trying to achieve too much with their headsets, and as a result they're losing focus and sacrificing the quality of of the actual gaming experience. I'm talking about these all-in-one headsets that have standalone PSVR, wireless gaming, hand tracking, eye tracking, face tracking, jukebox, toothbrush, whatever. All of that often with the expanse of their image resolution and FOV and other important things. But when making PlayStation VR 2, Sony knew exactly what features they wanted to see there and how they would leverage better gaming experience. Hence, there's no hand tracking and no color pass-through, simply because those features are not needed in PSVR 2, and a single cable connection instead of wireless. However, it has a wonderful inside-out tracking without the need for a camera. For me personally, the cable wasn't an issue while playing, and at the same time, it guarantees the incredible visual quality for all users, plus it also allowed them to save the cost on the headset. But one thing that I wished Sony did invest in was the built-in speakers. Currently, PSVR 2 doesn't have speakers and you need to use headphones. Moving on, I'm about ready to jump into the game, which allows you to select some comfort options and movement styles. For the demo, they enabled the physical movements, as those supposedly help new users get used to the motion in VR. So in order to move around, I would move my hands instead of teleporting or using smooth locomotion. But this of course can be changed. The game starts with me being on a boat being taken God knows where through the jungle filled with techno beasts in the usual style of Horizon. In this about 2-minute intro, you cannot do anything other than look around yourself and enjoy the view. This scene is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in VR. The splashes of bright and vivid colors are surrounding you everywhere you look, and the occasionally appearing beasts make your heart jump every time they spot you. Especially this giant one really made quite an impression on me. It was like entering a wonderland. However, I did see some strange things about the display. For example, I noticed some strange fuzzy look that kinda looked like the screen door effect. It wasn't too noticeable, but if you looked at it side by side with Vario Aerial, Pimax Crystal, and even Quest Pro, you could see that this is something that's very characteristic of PSVR 2. I also noticed that when you look at busy objects like the grass, for example, the stems wouldn't stay sharp and instead they would blur together just a little bit. That was contrasting with the exceptional sharpness of small objects when I was testing Pimax Crystal, even if they were viewed at large distances. To be clear, the image on PSVR 2 still looked really good and much better than most of the headsets that I have tried, with quite a large horizontal but also vertical FOV and a really nice overlapping of the lenses that made the image look more consistent with both your right and left eye. However, I did express my thoughts about the image quality to the curator, and here's what he said. You see, when I was about to start the game, I actually lifted my headset for just a little bit to see where I was standing, and he told me to put it back on right away, otherwise it would mess up the eye tracking calibration. And because I did remove it for just a little bit, it might have caused some imperfections in the visuals. I found it a bit odd, because why wouldn't I be able to remove my headset and then put it back on without messing up the settings? What if you needed to drink a glass of water or answer a phone and so you would remove a headset and put it back on? Do you really need to restart your calibration all over again if you do that? I kind of thought that the curator used that as the explanation for why the image wasn't quite perfect, but I don't think that that was the reason, because I've spoken to several other creators and they also mentioned that they noticed a little bit of that fuzzy looking features. Still, I'm a little bit worried now, and this is going to be one of the first things that I will test when I receive my own PSVR 2. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed my time playing Horizon on PSVR 2. The tracking was excellent. I never lost the tracking of my headset or the controllers once. The climbing felt natural and sometimes quite scary because of all the distances. The headset vibration was somewhat faint, but still noticeable and really added to the immersion. The bow shooting felt realistic and pretty challenging because, unlike in some games, it didn't show you that aim or that little cross on the screen, but you need to adjust your own aim by finding the best position of your hands. And I noticed absolutely no issues with the controller occlusion. Even though they do look a little bit bulky, they're still very comfortable. The bow shooting was also one of the best moments of the game to experience the forced feedback in the controllers. Even though it wasn't as strong as on PSVR 5 controllers, still Well, it was there, and I imagine that different games will take advantage of it differently. I had a really fun time exploring the world, and 30 minutes just flew by, leaving me longing for more. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the price. It's one of the most controversial topics, with some people saying that it's way too expensive and others saying that it is very reasonable for the features that it offers. To get to the bottom of this, let's break it down. We know that at launch, PSVR2 will cost $550 US. This will include the headset, the controllers, and basically everything you will need, with the exception of PS5, the retail price of which is $500. Now let's compare it to the original release of PSVR 1. When the headset was first released, it came out at $400, which at that time did not even include the camera, and you needed to buy it as an extra for $60. And you need to add in the fact that many of the games required controllers, and those go for $50 each. Add another $100 to the price of the headset, $560, that's already more expensive than PSVR 2. And the only major difference is the price of the actual console, PS4, $400. But when PS5 was released, I didn't hear people complaining about the $100 increase. So basically, if you take the PSVR only capabilities, you will be paying pretty much the same amount as you would for the first generation when it was first released. But after everything you've seen, I don't think I have to tell you just how better this new headset is. But what if we compare it to PC VR headsets? Most of the VR headsets that could compete with the image quality and features of PSVR 2 would go for at least $1,000. Probably more, and that would be just for the headset alone, and many of them would also require base stations and controllers. Instead of buying a PlayStation console, you would need to buy a VR-ready PC. Just the GPU alone that would be able to let you play high or ultra settings of games would be at least $1,000. That's RTX 3080. So the entire PC will go for much more than $1,500. And I'm not even adding the base stations and controllers. You're already getting a much higher price point than you would for both PSVR 2 and PlayStation 5. So these are my considerations when I think about the price of PSVR 2. Do I wish that it was cheaper? Of course. But do I think that it's consistent with Sony's history and reasonable for the features that it offers? Absolutely. Getting PSVR 2 and PlayStation 5 together will still get you the cheapest way for getting the highest quality of visuals in VR, on par with some PC VR heavy headsets. I gotta be honest, most of the VR tech that I checked at CES focused mostly on their hardware, and they were leaving the games as an afterthought. So I haven't tried almost any particular actual VR experiences, with the exception of HTC Vive XR Elite demo. So testing PSVR 2 and the amazing masterpiece of a game like Horizon really made an impression. Rest assured, a follow-up review is coming next month, and until then, check out my CES recap video and other VR headset reviews coming up soon. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Stay safe, and as always, happy gaming!